welcome to Unschooling Conversations. Today I'm joined by Iris. In this episode, hopefully Iris is going to share with us a little bit about her unschooling story and her work with neurodivergent people and executive function skills. My name is Heidi Steel. I'm a former teacher and unschooling parent to 4 school-aged children who are happy living and learning as they go. I have been unschooling for over 13 years, and you can find me and a host of unschooling resources at liveplaylearn.org. And I'm also inviting anyone to be involved in the podcast who has something to share from an unschooling perspective, or simply just share their story. So that could be you. And if you would like to join me and have a conversation, you can get in touch and we will have a chat together. Welcome to Iris. Iris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. I loved your introduction. Let me practice being succinct and truthful. And I love the invitation to come converse. That makes me feel very welcome. So I'm Iris. I reside in California in the United States. Um, I am neurodivergent identifying. I'm a late diagnosed autistic ADHD human. I parent 2 children, one toddler-ish, one elementary school-ish aged. We are on our unschooling journey, at least with one of them. The second one, we're watching as she emerges and, thinking about the differences that she has and like the complexities of how her, possible unschooling might look too. And I've been a speech therapist for 15-ish years. I took a break from it for some time to do more caregiving and then didn't know if I would ever go back, and then kind of am going back. And then also in that time, explored executive functioning and yeah, and working more in that capacity. And nowadays I'm a little bit more comfortable with being called a coach. I really didn't want to be called that in the beginning. And I think that's a lot of me coming to like, hey, can't we just all be peers in this space and learn together? But I think that fits the spirit of unschooling. And so I think I'm okay feeling what I feel about all that. And yeah, I think that's sufficient for an introduction for now.
Lovely. Iris is going to share with me her links, and I'm going to put them in the show notes. So if you are interested in her work, you can catch up with her there. We're gonna start, I think, by asking you what brought you to unschooling, because your children are both still quite young. I say that because I can say that now because my children are like, my eldest is 17, on the cusp of being 18. We're planning a lovely celebration for him for his 18th birthday. So from my point of view, you're still babies and your children are babies. So how can you talk a little bit about what brought you to unschooling?
Yeah, sure, happy to. And I totally welcome the little kid view because yeah, they are little. They really are. They're not like babies anymore, but they're still like littler. And I so very much enjoy hearing from families that have olders. Not that you call them olders. I don't know what you call them. So anyway, yeah, enjoy your stories. Um yeah, so our unschooling journey, I think it's been fun for me to hear just little snapshots of where people come from because it's some are more similar and others aren't. And I think, I mean, I worked in the California public schools for 9 years. And so, I saw some of the flaws of that model. I grew up completely in public schools, and that was kind of the option that my parents knew. And yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like even maybe was it like 15, I don't know. Maybe it was about 15 years, like before I became a parent or whatnot. Or okay, timeline's gonna be a little bit dicey. Okay, I might be speaking some untruths, but I started like listening to people who were considering unschooling or like, Iris Chen before I was a parent, just because I was like, oh, what she talks about is very interesting. And I wasn't like thinking about this will shape how I parent or this will shape how we educate, but I just remember like early days where she like had a Facebook group and I popped in. She was like, "Hi, other Iris," and that was when like the stakes were low. I didn't have kids, but just listening to little sound bites of what people were thinking about and finding it just really interesting. And then this is the long, I'm taking the long scenic route here, but I think even as a young adult, like I didn't have a language for it, but I feel like I kind of unschooled myself a little bit, being that like kind of young professional days when I was a younger SLP, like took some jobs, found some opportunities to like move overseas and do work there so that I can like fund myself in a cheap way, but so that I could like do some of the learning the way that I wanted to that I didn't get to because of having pretty boxy education growing up and then kind of just so-called like going down the track that people thought I should go to and like getting a professional degree, stuff like that. But in finding that, yeah, taking myself and walking around in different places and just living with people, that was so deeply joyful and really helped me see my humanity. And I think even back then when I didn't have the language for neurodivergence, feeling very free and very much myself and like unmasking without knowing I was unmasking. And I think also just challenging a lot of my like, cultural perceptions of myself and how other people saw me. It's just all really lovely. But I think the reason why I bring it up is I think even working or volunteering in other places also just gave me more of a view of like different ways people educate. Sometimes it was within a boxy building. Other times it was some alternative ideas still within a boxy building. But yeah, I think it even just being able to like step out of the United States during those years or moments helped me see that there are other ways to be. And oftentimes like it really highlighted to me like the pace of life and how much I liked it that we could slow down. And so I think that part does feel more full circle now that we have a life that is a little bit more unschooly. It has felt slower. And so it's healed a part of me, that my younger self that said like, hey, I don't want to live in the United States because I can't deal with the hustle culture for myself and I don't want it for whoever I am, yeah. Whoever is not entrapped, that is entangled with me in my life. But realizing that like, hey, I'm actually living pretty close to where I grew up or very much in this area. And we have chosen different and it's doable. It feels very countercultural and our lives like so, yeah, I don't like to say like the size of life because like our lives might feel small to somebody else, but it doesn't. It has its own expansiveness that I think it's just different and hard to put to words. But I didn't quite answer your question. So I think
No, that's fine. We
I can
can
still
come back round to that. I'm just gonna pull out just in case well, because I think it's important that you mentioned Iris Chen, and Iris Chen it does the untigering. She's got a book. In fact, I might have it. I'm looking up at the sky because my bookshelf is up there, by the way. And I have to explain to me, what are you doing? I do own it, and I have read it. So she has a book that's called Untigering, and she was really influential on my early days as well. She's so thoughtful and kind of exploratory in the way that she puts things, that it felt like a really safe way of questioning without feeling judgment or shame around where people were. And I have a podcast episode with her as well, which is actually focused around the book when she just released it. If people want to go and follow up on the information and the work that she's doing. I know in that time that she has expanded her work as well. But it's a really good place to go and visit. But what I also really love is how, like, we talk about unschooling and coming to unschooling, but there's all these threads that happen in our lives that it can be really hard to pinpoint a moment. Like, and I think that's what your little conversation did just there. It's like it's not one thing where you just go, oh yes, I had this moment, it was unschooling, and that's what we did. Like, I had a similar experience in the education system. There was years and years and years of this experience of working in an education system and really coming to a deep understanding that this was not a nice place to be for adults or children. And that like was one influence on my decision, but you like to go back even before that and to look at actually how open you were to just questioning things, exploring different ideas, being with different people. Um, there is a nature in unschooling parents, I think, that of being curious themselves and being open and exploring ideas that contribute to this that contribute to their own um, unschooling journey when it comes to their family and their own children. Um, are you curious about unschooling and want to know more? Perhaps you're on the edge of starting this adventure, or maybe you've been doing this a while, but you're looking for inspiration. After more than 13 years of unschooling 4 children and over 5 years supporting others on the same path, I have a vast library of resources that I'm happy to share with you for free, whatever stage of your journey you're in. You can check out the link in the description of the podcast, or you can head over to my website at liveplaylearn.org and look for the free resources tab. And there you will find lots of things to inspire you to keep living, learning, and playing together. I said that the wrong way round, didn't I? Anyway, it's also a great way to make sure that you don't miss an episode of the podcast, which we will get back to now. So have your children, so you've only got one that would be, you said elementary, so school age. Um, did, was there a time when they tried school at all, or have they always been out of school?
Yeah, thank you for asking that because I realized like that was the part I left out, but not on purpose. Yeah, when people ask me questions, I don't usually plan. I just see what comes, and that's what came out. So thank you for, validating the journey. Yeah, yeah. So, right. So I think in a way, like zooming out, because sometimes when I'm asked about the unschooling experience, like in my kind of day-to-day life, like I don't zoom out so much and realize like, oh, there were parts that kind of, wove together that made it make sense for me and for the rest of us that because usually I'll just jump straight to like, oh, right, we had pretty early burnout for my older one, both in like preschool, but also in what we call transitional kindergarten to kindergarten. So like pretty young, like in the United States, and not even everywhere here. You don't always have that grade, but it's like the kiddos that turn 4 to 5 within that year. But anyway, yeah, so we had a couple waves of like pretty like obvious burnout because I know some kids like when they burn out, it looks so different, right? But my child was pretty externalized with his burnout. I think it was started out internalized and was pretty heavily masked. And then let me think, yeah, the second time around when we had removed him from that school situation and he was able to look back and he would say some very interesting things. We'd be driving in a car and he'd be like, and he'd see the school that I went to high school at, and he'd be like, I feel very bad for all the kids that are still trapped in there. And I'm like, well, that's some real talk because that was him still like processing in his own body the feelings of how he felt in a school setting that didn't suit him. Even though towards the end I spent a lot of time in his classroom because he needed that co-regulation. I was like, oh, or the however many other children there, it might suit them just fine, even if, right, our school systems and generally how they're run are quite a bit outdated and, come from the Industrial Revolution and all that, and probably could use some remaking for lots. But at the same time, yeah, the struggle, it looked very different. Because I was like, oh, these kids, they seem happy to be sitting on the carpet and this and that. And mine was one that needed a lot of movement, a lot of autonomy, to choose how he learned and very much did not like to be told. And so I think it showed zooming back out, like, or zooming backwards. It showed up pretty early on, even when he was in home daycare and it was really young because the days were too long for him. There were some biting incidents. We learned really fast that if I could, get home sooner that was my public school job then. that we can shorten the days for him and then be outside the rest of the day and let him work out some of that energy. But yes, I think there were some clues even very, very early on that a more boxy way to learn that had too much sitting, too much indoor time, a lot of adult direction just wasn't um, going to be suited to my child and how he could be himself and not feel like he was controlling his whole body and his whole personhood all day long, which I think was his experience of masking. And then he would do the after school restraint collapse. I really dislike how public schools tend to normalize it, like, oh, you should just expect that. But I think nowadays the conversation is like, no, that actually means they've like held everything so tightly that they can't no longer, and then it all comes pouring out.
I
Um,
have, so my children have never been to school, but what you described there. So I used to teach reception. So here that's age 4 to 5 year olds. And I loved it. And it's in the UK, it used to be, and it does depend very much on what school you're in, very play orientated. So there was lots of opportunity to not be sitting, but creeping in were elements of requirements to sit and face the front and be still. And I knew for my second in particular, what you described there for your child, like I knew that he would be labeled the naughty child like within a week, and not because I as a teacher labeled children as naughty, but because the adults would be saying his name excessively. Like I could visualize that really, really easily. There would be that, you need to come and sit down, you need to keep your hands still, you need to like not run off calling after him because he was like bolting out the door. And so I was very happy with our decision to not even go there, not even send him, because I could envisage that being his reality, and I didn't want that for him. Like as a parent, I knew he was a wonderful human being, and that actually his need to run around and that was what he needed, and that was okay. It was joyful and beautiful, and I wasn't prepared to put him in a place where that wasn't validated, I guess. Um, yeah, so bless you and bless your child, because that's not an uncommon experience that you're talking about. Even on this side of the pond, that children of any age, but very young children, experience that very early on in their education, that actually there is a requirement on them to dishonor themselves and to ignore their own needs, in favor of externally looking like they're paying attention and they're doing the right things. Um, yeah, so it's yeah, and like you say, like different children respond in different ways. Some of them mask for years and years and years, and some of them, um, like right from the off, make their non-compliance known loudly. Um, but it's a difficult. I think if you're not expecting it as a parent, it's a difficult situation to find yourself in, that difference between the school expectation and actually what your child is telling you.
Yeah, for
It's a
sure.
difficult spot to be in. Yeah.
Can I share a couple of things that I
Yeah,
remember
go for it.
while you're
Yeah.
sharing? Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that was part of the story too, which is helpful. But yeah, I always love it when people share because it makes jostles things up for me. But you reminded me that yeah, like early reception teachers or reception teachers are always my favorite to work with because I feel like the spirit of play is still there. And then even when I was a professional provider, I always wondered like how come this it gets lost, in the upper grades, and how do you keep it? And I know it's harder because everyone's breathing down your throat to deliver this and that, um, but I didn't share that between my child's two burnout kind of seasons or whatnot. We had briefly, oh, and that's when my daughter was born, so it made it more complicated because he had a lot of just complicated feelings about this new person that he didn't really have any say about bringing it to our situation. But anyway, so I did accompany him to. We had something called they call it a parent co-op school. It's for preschool age children, but it's almost like unschooling for children. And so recently I went back to the setting for a different reason, non-personal, and I saw a parent that was yeah, parent that was a parent to one of my child's friends when we were there, and she had asked me like, "Hey, what is unschooling?" And I was like, "It's kind of like this, but just older." And that felt like the realest way to kind of like quickly tell her what it's like,
Yeah.
because so many parents in that, and it is more of a community feel too, because that place parents come in, they share what their passions are, they bring activities, the kids are outdoors, they get messy, it's all of it. And I remember in that setting back then, I like didn't, yeah, I guess I wasn't actively thinking about the word unschooling or what things would look like down the line, but just really, yeah, seeing how happy my child was and that he could actually come out of his burnout even in that situation because he was being stimulated in such a positive way too to build trusting, friendships and relationships with adults again, even in realizing that there are other ways to be. But anyway, that's kind of what came up for me as well.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question actually. The process of actually coming out of burnout. Like, what did that look like for you guys? Were there things that you actively and intentionally did, or is it just something that you can now look back on and say that was part of the process of moving on and healing?
Thank you. Sure. So yeah, I feel like the first burnout and the second burnout, there were similarities. So that the second time when we saw it, we knew right away that we needed to pull him out of the school situation he was in. Um, because some of it felt so familiar. But yeah, but I would say even yeah, the second time what felt different was the primary yeah, he needed to be so close to me, like really had a high co-regulation need that went from, kind of needing it, just being who he is, and then also just zooming as far up as it possibly could go. So almost needed to be like Velcro to me all the time, especially if we were outside of the home. And that made me realize how like, oh, there was whatever he experienced at school, like I think very good intention, but it just broke his trust at other people, and that he had tried using his voice to self-advocate, but within the design of what school looked like, it wasn't honored, right? So then he needed to rebuild that trust with adults mostly. I think like children were a whole different thing. Like he's always been the kid that like their kids are either okay and they're in his area and whatnot, we coexist, or he really, really, really likes. And I found that's actually been part of the component for him in his like burnout healing. Like yes, there was him healing by me being with him if we had to go out to like try things. Like we briefly tried forest school. It worked. And it was lovely for a little bit just because I was like, nature is a natural co-regulator. Why not? I would love to go to forest school. So I did go a little bit. And it was a safe landing space in many ways, just people of different identities. He didn't connect super well with all the kids there because they were a bit younger, but we got to be outside and it didn't look like school. And they let us do shorter days because they were very much, yeah, they just had a lot of like natural intuition with how to be with the land and like lovely language. And like they would use coyote calls to gather the children. And the kids would take naps under the trees. He didn't mind, never took a nap, but things like that, or natural found instruments, and like they scouted lovely locations. But and then there was one time where my kid was like, they had a giant rainstorm. My kid doesn't like water at all, but he survived. He was under a picnic bench and they like cover themselves with something, and he managed to like ask somebody for his umbrella. So I think in little moments, like yeah, experiences that he didn't think he could survive, he managed to, and then he found little bits of safety again over time with different adults or in different children or in trees or the swing or whatever it was. But I mean, that ended up not being the place we ultimately stayed the longest either. But I think we've been lucky to find some of these like transitional spaces of because I think I have a child where when he's in burnout, being at home and like getting to game or being on screens or spend time with me, it's good, but it's not the whole picture. He does need like really positive mental and physical stimulation to be his best self too. And he also has that social drive of needing to be seen by somebody that's not me and that's his same age or has similar special interests. So yeah, so thank you for your question, because I don't think I've thought about it. Like what were the components that ultimately helped him feel for himself too, that he was closer to his maybe most like fullest self or healed self, or how he's happy to be in his body. But yeah,
It's
I guess
something
I
that it's something that's really, I'm convinced the kind of post pandemic conversations in home educating spaces in the UK, there is a rise in discussions about burnout and recognizing that that is actually what is happening. And so that naturally poses the question about, well, actually, if I have a child that's in burnout, like, how do we move forward from that? Because this is actually really horrible and really hard and really devastating as a parent to watch. So to be able to share like that process and how the moving forward and the healing happens. Yeah, thank you for speaking into that, because I think it's really helpful for parents to see that there is a change and there is a movement forward and there is kind of like another side. But also, you know, like you said, your experience as well was like, you know, you had these two cycles of burnout, but actually in the second one, you kind of saw it earlier. Am I right in saying that? Um, so yeah, so you know that kind of you learn from yourself and you learn from your child, you know, what it is they're going through and also what it is um, that they need. So what does unschooling look like for you now? Like on a kind of, this is a really hard question, but like on a day-to-day basis, like what kind of things are you up to as a family?
Sure. And this is the one where my answer will probably sound different than like 99.99% of your guests on your podcast. So thank you for still inviting my answer. Um, yes, I would say maybe for so the year we pulled him out of kindergarten, he only made it to like 2.5 days of kindergarten before we decided this is probably really truly not going to work for us. Thank you for trying. And that's when we were at home, and I think a lot of the home, we didn't call it deschooling, but probably was deschooling-ish for both of us. It was a lot of being together. Initially, we looked at some like homeschooling like tools. Like I had a nature curriculum. He didn't like it because he was like, we really need to have snow for this to work. And where we live, we do not have snow as easily accessible. And but I think I've said this to my husband before that sometimes I am grateful that my child's no is a very strong no, because in that sense it makes it easier but harder. It's harder to describe for me as a parent of okay, this is where we're at. Versus my younger child is one where yeah, her no looks a little different. Sometimes like she'll say the no right away and then she'll realize it is actually something she wants, or sometimes she says the yes and it's not a true yes. And so reading her is a whole different experience and consent-based parenting or whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah, so anyway, yeah, and then like my child, I don't know, he tried some different tech tools and then but it I started feeling less like a parent and more like the person trying to get him to do stuff. And that really was not very helpful for our relationship. He really needed me to just be his parent, especially because he was, yeah, actively in burnout, whether we called it that or not. And yeah, so I think just over time, it started to look more and more unschooly without us labeling it as such. But a lot of its early days where we gamed a lot together. So I'm quite good at Roblox. For a lot of children who come to me or teens or whatever, we can have perfectly lovely conversations about gaming just because I've put in a lot of hours and there are games I like too. And yeah. So I think in that sense, even those conversations about screens and screen time and all that, it's not as charged perhaps for me specifically because I'm like I've spent my time on screens. I do as an adult, and I know how the parts I like and the parts that are a little trickier. And yeah, I know what he plays, and it's such a deep joy for him, and and he likes some games more than others, and I have some that I like wandering around games where I'm like, I am going on a trip, we're camping, we're going to the lava, like, or we're in some weird Tokyo like alley, and we have like someone gave us an errand to run, but I can see like the bits of learning, and I'm having fun, and it feels exploratory, even though we're in a digital world. That some of these like artists or whoever designed these like they have been thoughtful. And but without me playing, I think I wouldn't have had that same sort of experience or insight into what these games were offering him. So he was still getting to go explore, even though we were at home. And he did not want to
Yeah,
go out a lot of the time.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think even to the prior chat about like coming out of burnout, I had to be okay as a parent lots of times to like offer going out? And the answer really was no, like what, maybe a very loud one or lots of different types of no. But yeah, and I think that's still part of my child too. Like he does like to go out when it's a special interest, maybe to go visit cats or to like see a friend he really likes. But oftentimes he really does like to be home, and it doesn't, and he's exploring in a way that may look a little different from other people, but yeah, he is learning his own way. And and I think it goes also like he's learned a lot from like YouTube and different creators and go on trips too. So like yes, maybe younger me when I was funding my own cheaper travel would like to go and explore that way. But I'm like, he is learning some of the same things, but just through somebody else's story or narrative. And this is where he's at. But yeah.
I love that. I love that. Do have a very similar experience with the same child that maybe they would be really good friends. But or they does have very similar experiences and maybe profiles, maybe not. Although having said that, my son is not overly sociable. That's not one of his key drivers.
Mm.
But like really similar to you, like that, I have a whole appreciation for kind of the artistic nature, the narrative of games that people have put a lot of thought in, what they call the lore, LORE, of some of the games that he plays, the detail, the music that they choose that accompanies what they're doing, and like you, like I'm not a gamer. That's not my like as but I have put my hours in. We have got to a different stage now because my son is 16, and actually quite quickly, like probably once he entered adolescence, which he did comparatively quite young, so about 11, 12. There was definitely a shift developmentally in him, and the games, his gaming technique, like way exceeded mine in any way. But like those hours that I've put in during his younger years in terms of playing, watching the YouTube creators with him, um, yeah, all that stuff, um, have really paid off. Like he'll still talk to me about his games and what he's playing and share with me the stories and the insights, and that's been a really valuable, like ongoing through his teen years. Has been really valuable as a way for us to connect with each other and for him to be able to share openly what he's doing in that space, which I'm sure you're aware is not the experience of every teenager on the planet, that they feel comfortable being able to do that. Yeah, but I don't play now because quite honestly, I'm useless at the games. I'm useless at the games that he plays. Like I'm not like, and he plays quite a lot of team games now. So saying that being socially driven isn't one of his things, actually, he connects socially with a really cool group of friends now online, and that has been established for years now, and they play team games together. So I would be a detrimental member of the team. I don't feel that I would play my role to a standard whereby um, they would succeed as a team in the game. So I watch as a bystander now. But yeah, but it's lovely to hear that about your experience and about how your son enjoys exploring the world, because it is a way of exploring the world, and it's a really safe way for some of our children. And people are going to pick up on the fact I've said a safe way with online, online and gaming and that kind of stuff. But in terms of navigating the unknown, like you can turn a computer off. Like if you don't like where the game's going, you can just turn the computer off, and then when you're ready, you can go back to it, right? Or if you kind of don't fancy going down that street or that route on the role play you're on, well then you don't. Or if you just fancy tiptoeing in for a few minutes to have a look and then rewind, like rewinding, they have so much more autonomy in those spaces, and some of our children really benefit um, and need that. So thank you for sharing your experience, because it is something that parents kind of question and worry about. So I think that's really valuable be able to share how you navigate that and how you can give your child autonomy in that space, autonomy to choose, and to value that interest that they have and that thing that they need, but to do it in a way that's really honouring to you kind of all as a family and maintaining relationship as well. So thank you. Yeah, go for it.
You remind me, because I was like, oh, right, I didn't answer your question again, which is kind of how I am. Sorry. But once you start sharing, then I remember other things I could have said. Yeah, it's funny what you said about like being a teammate. My kid knows that like if they're like if it's a fighting team sort of game or like some sort of thing like that, I often will be the farmer or something that I'll plant you plants and these will help supercharge whatever it is you need. I'll create resources for you. But yeah, it just goes to show we all have different roles and as mama is a farmer really likes that. But anyway, your sharing also helped me realize that, oh yeah, like maybe my child in real life, sometimes he's a little bold with his social advances and other times he's really not if he doesn't know how to read the situation completely or yeah, but in an online space, sometimes he is a little bit more bold because he feels confident in what he can offer in the gaming situation or whatnot. And that's one piece of it. And then, oh, I also didn't get to the part where or forgot to mention that yeah, so after we kind of explore different types of being at home together ourselves, we ended up finding a local unschooling program. So that's where he spends 4 days of his week for lots of his hours. We tend to do a very late start because they have the generosity of knowing neurodivergent brains and bodies. And so they have a big window of you can come whenever. And we tend to even come after that window. And they've just been lovely. They say there's no such thing as late. And that's what they used to tell us at that Forest program too. And that was just so supportive of me. And it's changed our lives. I just wish there are many more offerings in the world where there's no such thing as late. You come when you want to, and then you come happy to be there and people happy to see you. And it's a great offer. And generous offering. And yeah, and they do build gaming into their day too during certain windows. They do use devices in different ways. And so it makes it so that my child, even if he's having a harder day for whatever reason, he knows that he has these pockets that he can rely on where this is my special interest and I have these people that I enjoy there and they value that part of me too. And his program's a 4-day week, so we're together on Fridays and in the mornings and the afternoons. But I think that's been a good balance for me as neurodivergent adult person because it's returned a lot of spoons and energy to me too. Then during the pockets I have, be able to do something with other people's children, which that at the end of the day, I'm realizing again, it does fill me up in a different way and it gives me a little bit of distance from my family. And then so that the times we are together, I can support his special interests, which right now is we are getting very close to adopting 2 little kitties. Well, not total kitties. They're almost 2 years old. So they're kind of yeah, they're not total kittens, but this has kind of been a long time coming where we're, trying to learn at our own pace in different ways. And but that's what he's into right now. So it's like, okay, it's we may be learning about how to be a good family to a couple of cats and bring them into the fold because if the truth is my child doesn't necessarily want to leave and go to a bunch of museums or go out to the beach or whatever, he wants to bring cats in. And so this is what we're going to support right now.
We have 2 cats amongst a long list of other animals in our house. Pets, I should specify pets in our house. They're beautiful and they have really made a huge difference. I mean, we've had them a few years now, but I couldn't believe when we brought them in the difference that they made to the children and how they're actually a really essential part of our family and their life experience, like a positive life experience, and all the love that they get from having these cats. So I wish you the same. I hope it's a really positive experience, and that like something did happen when the cats came in, like something kind of released So yeah, I hope that will be your experience too. I'd really like to have a chat with you about your work. So you work with neurodivergent people, but your specialist is like the area of executive functioning. So I'd really love to know more about that. I work with a lot of families who are neurodivergent, and talking about children and their executive functioning comes up a lot. So I feel it's a really special opportunity to ask you to kind of speak into that space of what executive functioning. I mean, we laughed at the beginning and said we could talk about our own executive functioning, but I think we'll try and narrow it down to children and young people for this episode. Maybe we'll come back another time and talk about parents and maybe women in particular. If you're open to that. But yeah, so tell us a little bit about your your work. Tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you.
So this is the part where I'm gonna tell you about the Unschooling Village Hub. I wonder if that's something that you've heard of yet. It's a membership group I run for community, but also inspiration and peer support. Members get access to regular teaching and coaching workshops, self-care sessions, because taking care of you is really vitally important to your unschooling, and lots of practical resources for unschooling in your family. It's packed with value, events, and compassion. The best bit is it's only £20 a month with no ongoing contract. You can simply stay as long as you need us. You can find out more by checking out the link in the podcast description or heading over to the website liveplaylearn.org and sign up there. And we very much look forward to welcoming you into the Unschooling Village Hub. We're here for you wherever you are on your unschooling journey. And now, more from the podcast.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer this away where it's only about children, but to be candid about it, oftentimes, yeah, I don't know. I think I bring a lot of myself and how I show up as a human, with my brain and body into some of these sessions I do with students because I don't know. I think as a young person, I really wanted to be seen in a way that more than I was. I was seen for some parts of myself and then other parts less so. And now that I feel like this generation has so much more language for brains and bodies and neurotypes and all sorts of things and lots more resources created by neurodivergent adults, whether they're like videos or they're comics or there's just so much richness to pull. And I think at the end of the day, even when I was just primary speech therapist person, like what I was good at was pulling in resources. I wasn't always the one making them because I love other people's creativity, but my own takes a lot longer and it doesn't always come out the way I expect it to. But yeah, so I think when I do work with students now of different ages, I tell them right off the bat, like, hey, I'm a neurodivergent person too. These are my neurotypes. We might share one, we might share both. And just seeing their comfort level with wanting to talk about it. And it's not a requirement. And usually I meet with the parents first and get their comfort level with it too. But I find that I'm attracting families that do want for, brains and bodies we talked about, nervous systems we talked about. And also I think kind of a while back, Sunny Jane Wise, who's the lived experience educator on Instagram, came through with some language around how, like, like executive functioning skills or norms or whatever, it's largely, invented, created by neurotypical people. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but it's a little bit like time, which is also sort of like, just created by people, and people said this is the time zone, and even time changes, or like what we should be doing within certain hour. And like a lot of it is a little bit of a cultural narrative, and being able to just acknowledge that. And I think releases some shame of, hey, if we need to make our lives different or choose to, that is possibly our right if there's some privilege to, especially within an unschooling kind of structure. And that I think some people relate more to the language of, oh, executive dysfunction. Other people relate to more of differences because, like, yeah, there is maybe some impact to our day, but just realizing that maybe there doesn't have to be that kind of like medical model sort of language or narrative of like one is wrong, one is right, one's a deficit, one is, whatnot. And so I think in my work, the thing I like the most is just to bring in tons of neurodivergent voices. And the more like teenager voices I can find, the better too. Sometimes there'll be teens out there that make their own videos that are really funny, and it just makes them more relatable for kids of different ages. And I like it when the kids will like judge what comes into. They'll be like, oh, was that really real? Is that what they're or are they just doing this for, when we pull in like pieces from TV shows where people are, or as an example of self-advocacy. I pulled in just a tiny clip from The Survivor. I was like, I have some feelings around this, but like this is the part I like, and what do you think? And when kids are able to be really real, I was like, was that really scripted, or was that, but just to be able to see lots of different examples of ways people are trying to show up in a way that is true to themselves. I think it's breaking open that narrative that there's only one way to live, right? Because I think at least how I grew up, there was more just this is how you do it. Like there, yeah, I wasn't shown a lot of possibility, and I hope, I don't know, this generation it's opened up more, right? And that autonomy or true power to choose or have fuller consent of what they're choosing, even if it looks like a so-called more traditional route. I think it's just all lovely. And then giving space for like adults live in all sorts of ways too. And some of the I've always thought, even as a very young person, like the most interesting people are the ones that had such different kinds of stories or chose something completely off the so-called path. And yeah, can we celebrate those? Or can we amplify the stories? And so I don't know if I answered your question again, but
Do you know, I wasn't expecting that at all, but in a really good way. Like I think you've just
thank you.
knocked that completely out of the park. Like that's amazing. Like to kind of to go in and say it doesn't have to look like this. Like this is how some, that element of choice that you were talking about, just having that element of lots, like looking at the way lots of different people do things. um yeah, there was so much in there I can't even remember. I'm gonna have to like go back, people, rewind what I just said and really take that in. Our kids don't have to fit a mold of normal. They can kind of really explore and honor who they are. And yeah, I love that. I love that so much. I don't know what to say. I was gonna say I think you've left me speechless, but I've literally just like chatted for like a full minute and a half. Um, yeah, I have so much love for what you just said. That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Heidi. You're very
Yeah,
kind.
I really
Like
hope people.
I don't know if it makes any like I don't know where it lands
I
or
just
how it.
Yeah, I hope people really let that sink in and go and you know go back and listen to it again and really let that sink in. Um, I forgot to mention, and I do this to everybody. It's going to become a feature on the podcast. So I forgot to mention that I would to do a check-in with you. So I've invited you to come and have a chat on the podcast. Whether there was anything that you came with the intention of, I feel that during our conversation together, I really would like to share whatever it is. So this is my check-in where I say, do you feel that you have shared everything that you would like to share, or is there anything in particular that you would like to end our conversation with?
Sure.
With an apology that I didn't forewarn you that I was going to do.
Oh, that's fine.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, it's so funny because I mean, yeah, I love like forewarnings and all that, but oftentimes I'll read it and I'm like, I can't think about it too much, or it becomes a demand, and I end up saying something totally different anyway. So, yeah, appreciate everything you're offering. Yeah, actually, maybe the tag on I'll do has a little bit to do with what we just talked about, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And so I think because I do still work with some students, like some are in looser educational, settings, others are in more boxy situations still. And for the ones in more boxy situations, I feel like, yeah, sometimes I think there's power to acknowledging that like your school day is really long. You have used a lot of spins just to get through this, and that, yeah, acknowledging the parts that are really hard. And it's like, it's not all you. This is the system. Or so whether we're naming like the school system or the health system, or just recognizing that to put all that weight on the individual is not fair, whether it's the adult or the student or the child, or yeah, and to acknowledge the structures that we live in, and some of it is not designed to be inclusive or supportive of all different kinds of brains or bodies. I think that, at least for me, it releases a load and it helps me feel seen when other people do that for me. Because even if just for me, like, and as an example, like accessing traditional one-to-one therapy, I recently realized that that is not a model that works for me. Like, I need something a little bit maybe less Western in structure or design, like a group kind of story sharing kind of thing. Oftentimes has healed me more, or me reading someone else's memoir, that sort of thing, and learning asynchronously that way. And like, that's still part of my own adult exploration healing journey too. But I think to take that same sort of spirit to help kids realize, like, yeah, there's a lot to acknowledge, and your feelings are very valid, and it's not always you. And so maybe that's my parting sentiment.
Yeah, bless you. And I think we can translate that to ourselves as well. That there is a lot going on around us, maybe with neighbours or extended family, or maybe if we're accessing, healthcare services or just paying the bills, like life. There's a lot going on in life that affects us as well. So just being able to name that and acknowledge that for ourselves as well. I have really loved spending this time with you, and I thank you so much for coming and sharing on the podcast. Thank you very much.